Hello, greetings, salutations, konnichiwa, and every other form of green across this vast, marvelous, jolly multiverse. I am Matsu Quinox. This is Horace, and welcome once again, my dear scholars, to the study. Today is a special day. It seems it is a festive time of your many years. I'm not sure on the names, but I am certain that this is a wondrous moment, a wondrous time for many people. Hello there, Dr. Zadium, welcome. And I saw earlier, hello there, Kintron, welcome to the study. I'm glad you could come. Yes. It is that time. Once again, I hope everyone had a good day, or good evening, or good afternoon, whatever the time may be. I hope you're all well. I myself, well, I kept busy all day. It seems that there were many books that appeared this time. Oh, I have so many to add to the collection. Oh, excuse me there for a second. That was a bit of a book squid trying to get in here. Oh, cool skeleton. Good afternoon or whatever time it is. Yes. Give me 1 second. I have a little thing I must attend to for a moment. Hmm. There we are. Sorry about that. Some minor inconveniences that happened. Oh dear. Anyway, well, tonight, or whatever time it is a very special moment. Tonight's stream will be fairly short, I will say that. It's not going to be one of our longer ones, but given many of my dear scholars are busy with many other activities, I simply wanted to come in and provide a final evening's entertainment for now. Cool Skeleton, Merry Chrysler. Yes, Merry Chrysler to you as well. Yes, Merry Chrysler and many other holidays as well. Excuse me. Julian20, Merry greetings to you. Oh, hello there, Julian20. Welcome. Merry greetings to you as well. We celebrate many holidays here in the study. I mean, when time moves as oddly as it does here, yes, you would expect it. But tonight, we will be finishing up our reading of A Christmas Carol. Plus, I thought it would be fun to read a very quick other piece of holiday writings as done by the master Charles Dickens. And then we'll have our usual little discussion right after. I hope that is to your liking, my dear scholars. Yes, indeed. Excuse me. Kinchan, other holiday writings, fun. Yes, he wrote many writings on Christmas. The one I have chosen is not. It's not a very well-known one, but it is wonderfully descriptive of the season. Cool Skeleton Krampus? No, I'm afraid not. I'm afraid it's not Krampus. Oh my goodness. No, he wrote many other parts of For Christmas. Though, like I said, this will be a shorter stream, as I'm certain many of you scholars have been busy with your own time. So, my dear scholars, shall we, well, shall we begin our final reading of the final chapter of A Christmas Carol? Julian20 says, yes, please. Oh, someone is eager for the finishing of this season. Cool Skeleton says yes as well. Alright. Let me just position myself just a little bit. Hydrate a little. Prepare myself. And let me part the curtain. Alright. Excuse me. And we will begin with Stave 5 of A A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Stave 5. The end of it. Yes, and the bedpost was his own. The bed was his own. The room was his own. Best and happiest of all, the time before him was his own, to make amends in. Cool Skeleton, have you fed Horace today? Wait, do mystical time scrolls eat? He fed himself. He does eat, yes. His favorite food's honey. I'm not sure why, but he did eat today. Not sure where he gets the food, but still. Best and happiest of all, the time before him was his own, to make amends in. I will live in the past, the present, and the future, Scrooge repeated as he scrambled out of bed. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. Oh, Jacob Marley, heaven and the Christmas time be praised for this. I say it on my knees, old Jacob, on my knees. He was so fluttered and so glowing with good intentions that his broken voice would scarcely answer to his call. He had been sobbing violently in his conflict with the spirit, and his face was wet with tears. They are not torn down, cried Scrooge, folding one of his bed curtains in his arms. They are not torn down, rings and all. They are here. I am here. The shadows of the things that would have been may be dispelled. They will be. I know they will. His hands were busy with his garments all this time, turning them inside out, putting them on upside down, tearing them, mislaying them, making them parties to every kind of extravagance. I don't know what to do, cried Scrooge, laughing and crying in the same breath, and making a perfect Laocoon of himself with his stockings. I am as light as a feather. I am as happy as an angel. I am as merry as a schoolboy. I am as giddy as a drunken man. A Merry Christmas to everybody. A Happy New Year to all the world. Hello here. Whoop! Hello! He had frisked himself into the sitting room and was now standing there, perfectly winded. There's the saucepan that the gruel was in, cried Scrooge, starting off again and frisking round the fireplace. There's the door by which the ghost of Jacob Marley entered. There's the corner where the ghost of Christmas present sat. There's the window where I saw the wandering spirits. It's all right. It's all true. It all happened. Cool Skeleton, this man is senile. LOL, yeah. Well, that's certainly a way to read it. Really, for a man who had been out of practice for so many years, it was a splendid laugh, a most illustrious laugh, the father of a long, long line of brilliant laughs. I don't know what day of the month it is, said Scrooge. I don't know how long I've been among the spirits. I don't know anything. I'm quite a baby. Never mind, I don't care. I'd rather be a baby. Hello! Whoop! Hello here! He was checked in his transports by the churches ringing out the lustiest peals he had ever heard. Clash, clang, hammer, ding, dong, bell, bell, dong, ding, hammer, clang, clash. Oh, glorious, glorious. Running to the window, he opened it and put out his head. No fog, no mist. Clear, bright, jovial, stirring cold. Cold, piping for the blood to dance to. Golden sunlight, heavenly sky, sweet fresh air, merry bells. Oh, glorious, glorious. What's today? Cried Scrooge, calling downward to a boy in Sunday clothes, who perhaps had loitered in to look about him. I? Returned the boy with all his might of wonder. What's today, my fine fellow? Said Scrooge. To-day? Replied the boy. Why, Christmas Day. It's Christmas Day, said Scrooge to himself. "I haven't missed it. The spirits have done it all in one night. They can do anything they like. Of course they can. Of course they can. Hello, my fine fellow." "Hello," returned the boy. Excuse me for a second. "Do you know the Poulters in the next street but one at the corner?" Scrooge inquired. "I should hope I did," replied the lad. "An intelligent boy," said Scrooge. "A remarkable boy. Do you know whether they've sold the prize turkey that was hanging up here? There. Not the little prize turkey. The big one." "What, the one as big as me?" returned the boy. "What a delightful boy," said Scrooge. "It's a pleasure to talk to him. Yes, my buck." "It's hiding there now," replied the boy. "Is it?" said Scrooge. "Go and buy it." "Walker!" exclaimed the boy. "No, no," said Scrooge. "I am in earnest. Go and buy it, and tell him to bring it here, that I may give them the direction where to take it. Come back with the man, and I'll give you a shilling. Come back with him in less than 5 minutes, and I'll give you half a crown." The boy was off like a shot. He must have had a steady hand at a trigger. Who could have got a shot off half so fast? "I'll send it to Bob Cratchit's," whispered Scrooge, rubbing his hands and splitting with a laugh. "He shan't know who sends it. It's twice the size of Tiny Tim. Joe Miller never made such a joke as sending it to Bob's will be." Cool Skeleton, half a crown sounds like a deal. Oh, yes. Half a crown was actually quite a bit of money for a kid that age. The hand in which he wrote the address was not a steady one, but write it he did, somehow, and went downstairs to open the street door, ready for the coming of the poulterer's man. As he stood there waiting his arrival, the knocker caught his eye. "I shall love it as long as I live," cried Scrooge, patting it with his hand. "I scarcely ever looked at it before. What an honest expression it has in its face! It's a wonderful knocker. Here's the turkey. Hello! Whoop! How are you? Merry Christmas!" It was a turkey. He could have never stood upon his legs, that bird. He would have snapped 'em short off in a minute. That's like sticks of sealing wax. "Why, it's impossible to carry that to Camden Town," said Scrooge. "You must have a cab." The chuckle with which he said this, and the chuckle with which he paid for the turkey, and the chuckle with which he paid for the cab, and the chuckle with which he recompensated the boy, were only to be exceeded by the chuckle with which he sat down breathless in his chair again, and chuckled till he cried. Shaving was not an easy task, for his hand continued to shake very much, and shaving requires attention, even when you don't dance while you are at it. But if he had cut the end of his nose off, he would have put a piece of sticking plaster over it, and been quite satisfied. He dressed himself all in his best, and at last got out into the streets. The people were by this time pouring forth, as he had seen them with the ghost of Christmas present, and walking with his hands behind him, Scrooge regarded everyone with a delighted smile. He looked so irresistibly pleasant, in a word, that 3 or 4 good-humored fellows said, "Good morning, sir. Merry Christmas to you." And Scrooge set off, and afterwards, that of all the blithe sounds he had ever heard, those were the blithest in his ears. He had not gone far, when coming on towards him, he beheld the portly gentleman who had walked into his counting-house the day before, and said, "Scrooge and Marley's, I believe." It sent a pain across his heart to think how this old gentleman would look upon him when they met, but he knew what path lay straight before him, and he took it. "My dear sir," said Scrooge, quickening his pace and taking the old gentleman by both his hands. "How do you do? I hope you succeeded yesterday. It was very kind of you. A Merry Christmas to you, sir."
Mr. Scrooge?
"Yes," said Scrooge, "that is my name, and I fear it may not be pleasant to you. Allow me to ask your pardon, and will you have the goodness—" Here Scrooge whispered in his ear.
Lo- Lord bless me!
Cried the gentleman as if his breath were gone.
My dear Mr. Scrooge, are you serious?
"If you please," said Scrooge. "Not a farthing less. A great many back payments are included in it, I assure you. Will you do me that favour?"
My dear sir,
said the other, shaking hands with him.
I don't know what to say to such
"Don't say anything, please," retorted Scrooge. "Come and see me. Will you come and see me?"
I will,
cried the old gentleman, and it was clear he meant to do it. "Thank ye," said Scrooge. "I am much obliged to you. I thank you 50 times. Bless you." He went to church, and walked about the streets, and watched the people hurrying to and fro, and patted children on the head, and questioned beggars, and looked down in the kitchens of houses, and up to the windows, and found that everything could yield him pleasure. He had never dreamed that any walk, that anything, could give him so much happiness. In the afternoon, he turned his steps towards his nephew's house. He passed the door a dozen times before he had the courage to go up and knock, but he made a dash and did it. "Is your master at home, my dear?" said Scrooge to the girl. Nice girl. Very. "Yes, sir." "Where is he, my love?" said Scrooge. "He's in the dining room, sir, alone with mistress. I'll show upstairs, if you please." "Thank ye. He knows me," said Scrooge, with his hand already on the dining room lock. "I'll go in here, my dear." He turned it gently, and saddled his face in, round the door. They were looking at the table, which was spread out in great array, for these young housekeepers are always nervous on such points, and like to see that everything is right. "Fred," said Scrooge. Dear heart alive, how his niece by marriage started! Scrooge had forgotten for the moment about her sitting in the corner with the footstool, or he wouldn't have done it on any account. "Why, bless my soul!" cried Fred. "Who's that?" "It is I, your Uncle Scrooge. I've come to dinner. Will, will you let me in, Fred?" Let him in! It is a mercy he didn't shake his arm off. He was at home in 5 minutes. Nothing could be heartier. His niece looked just the same. So did Topper when he came. So did the plump sister when she came. So did everyone when they came. Wonderful party, wonderful games, wonderful unanimity, wonderful happiness. Dr. Zadium snort. I don't. What's so funny? What is so funny, my dear Dr. Zadium? Oh, excuse me. Dr. Zadium, lots of arrivals. I suppose. Not sure what's so funny about that. But he was early at the office next morning. Oh, he was early there. If he could only be there first and catch Bob Cratchit coming late. That was the thing he had set his heart upon. And he did. And he did it. Yes, he did. The clock struck 9. No Bob. Quarter past. No Bob. He was full 18 minutes and a half behind his time. Scrooge sat with his door wide open that he might see him come into the tank. His hat was off before he opened the door, his comforter too. He was on his stool in a jiffy, driving away with his pen as if he were trying to overtake 9 o'clock. "Hello," growled Scrooge in his accustomed voice as near as he could feign it. "What do you mean by coming here at this time of day?"
I'm very sorry, sir," said Bob. "I am behind my time."
"You are," repeated Scrooge. "Yes, I think you are. Step this way, if you please."
"It's only once a year, sir," pleaded Bob, appearing from the tank. "Shall not be repeated. I was making rather merry yesterday, sir."
"Now I'll tell you what, my friend," said Scrooge. "I am not going to stand this sort of thing any longer. And therefore," he continued, leaping from his stool and giving Bob such a dig in the waistcoat that he staggered back into the tank again, "and therefore I'm about to raise your salary."
Bob trembled, and got a little nearer to the ruler. He had a momentary idea of knocking Scrooge down with it, holding him and calling to the people in the court for help, and a straight waistcoat.
"A Merry Christmas, Bob,"
said Scrooge with an earnestness that could not be mistaken, as he clapped him on the back.
"A merrier Christmas, Bob, my good fellow, than I have given you for many a year. I'll raise your salary, and endeavour to assist your struggling family, and we will discuss your affairs this very afternoon, over a Christmas bowl of smoking bishop. Bob, make up the fires, and buy another coal scuttle before you dot another I, Bob Cratchit."
Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all, and infinitely more. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. He became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city knew, or any other good old city, town, or borough in the good old world. Some people laughed to see the alteration in him, but he let them laugh, and little heeded them, for he was wise enough to know that nothing ever happened on this globe for good, at which some people did not have their fill of laughter in the outset, and knowing that such as these would be blind anyway, he thought it quite as well that they should wrinkle up their eyes and grins, as have a malady in less attractive forms. His own heart laughed, and that was quite enough for him. He had no further intercourse with spirits, but lived upon the total abstinence principle ever afterwards. And it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well, if any man alive possessed the knowledge. May that be truly said of us and all of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone. And that was Stave 5, the end of it all, and the end of A Christmas Carol. Julian 20 Bravo, thank you, thank you, thank you so much. It's a joy to read that story again. Thank you, thank you. Oh, you're making me blush. Ah, before we have our little discussion for the finish up the evening, there is one story I wanted to go. Alien 20 was a wonderful journey through December. Well, I'm glad. I'm glad it made you happy. I wanted to share the joy of that story with all of you. I thought it'd be nice to read a little essay that that
Dickens wrote. And it's a very simple one. It's not very long, but it describes Christmas time as Dickens saw it at the time. And I thought it might be a little nice little closeout for this session in reading Dickens. And it's simply called Christmas Festivities. And it talks about family traditions with Christmas and how a family would celebrate it. It's quite nice and sentimental. So I think we shall read this and then we'll go into discussion. Another sip of water. Christmas festivities. Christmas time. That man must be a misanthrope indeed, in whose breast something like a jovial feeling is not roused, in whose mind some pleasant associations are not awakened, by the reoccurrence of Christmas. There are people who will tell you that Christmas is not to them what it used to be, that each succeeding Christmas has found some cherished hope or happy prospect of the year before dimmed or passed away, and that the present only serves to remind them of reduced circumstances and straitened incomes, of the feasts that once bestowed on hollow friends, and of the cold looks that meet them now in adversity and misfortune. Never heed such dismal reminiscences. There are few men who have lived long enough in the world who cannot call up such thoughts any day of the year. Then do not select the merriest of the 365 for your doleful recollections, but draw your chair nearer to the blazing fire, fill the glass, and send round the song. And if your room be smaller than it was a dozen years ago, or if your glass is filled with reeking punch instead of sparkling wine, put a good face on the matter, and empty it offhand, and fill another, and troll off the old ditty you used to sing, and thank God it's no worse. Look on the merry faces of your children as they sit round the fire. One little seat may be empty, one slight form that gladdened the father's heart and roused the mother's pride to look upon may not be there. Dwell not upon the past. Think not that, one short year ago, the fair child now fast resolving into dust sat before you, with the bloom of health upon its cheek and the gay unconsciousness of infancy in its joyous eye. Reflect upon your present blessings, of which every man has many. Well, that's a little bit dark. Well, again, that was the time. Short lifespans and everything. Man has many, not on your past misfortunes, of which all men have some. Fill your glass again with a merry face and a contented heart. Our life on it, but your Christmas shall be merry, and your New Year a happy one. Who can be insensible to the outpourings of good feeling and the honest interchange of affection attachment which abound at this season of the year? A Christmas family party. We know nothing in nature more delightful. There seems a magic in the very name of Christmas. Petty jealousies and discords are forgotten. Social feelings are awakened in bosoms to which they have long been strangers. Father and son, or brother and sister who have met and passed with averted gaze, or a look of cold recognition for months before, proffer in return the cordial embrace, and bury their past animosities in their present happiness. Kindly hearts that have yearned towards each other, but have been withheld by false notions of pride and self-dignity, are again united, and all is kindness and benevolence. Would that Christmas lasted the whole year through, and that the prejudices and passions which deformed our better nature were never called into action among those to whom, at least, they should ever be strangers. The Christmas family party that we mean is not a mere assemblage of relations, got up at a week or two's notice, originating this year, having no family precedence in the last, and not likely to be repeated in the next. It is an annual gathering of all the accessible members of the family, young or old, rich or poor, and all the children look forward to it for some 2 months beforehand in a fever of anticipation. Formerly, it was always held at Grandpapa's, but Grandpapa getting old and Grandmama getting old too, and rather infirmed, they have given up housekeeping and domesticated themselves with Uncle George. That's nice. So the party always takes place at Uncle George's house, but Grandmama sends in most of the good things, and Grandpapa always will toddle down all the way to Newgate Market to buy the turkey, which he engages a porter to bring home behind him in triumph, always insisting on the man's being rewarded with a glass of spirits, over and above his hire, to drink a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to Aunt George. As to Grandma, she is very secret and mysterious for 2 or 3 days beforehand, but not sufficiently so to prevent rumors getting afloat that she has purchased a beautiful new cap with pink ribbons for each of the servants, together with soldiery books and penknives and pencil cases for the younger branches, to say nothing of divers secret additions to the order originally given by Aunt George at the pastry cook's, such as another dozen of mince pies for the dinner, and a large plum cake for the children. On Christmas Eve, Grandma is always in excellent spirits, and after employing all the children during the day in stoning the plums, and all that, insists regularly every year on Uncle George coming down to the kitchen, taking off his coat and stirring the pudding for half an hour or so. Excuse me. Excuse me again. Which Uncle George good humoredly does, to the vociferous delight of the children and servants. And the evening concludes with a glorious game of blind man's buff, in an early stage of which Grandpa takes great care to be caught, in order that he may have an opportunity of displaying his dexterity. On the following morning, the old couple, with as many of the children as the pew will hold, go to church in great state, leaving Aunt George at home dusting decanters and filling casters, and Uncle George carrying bottles into the dining parlor, and calling for corkscrews and getting into everybody's way. This is actually quite nice. When the church party returns to lunch, Grandpapa produces a small sprig of mistletoe from his pocket, and tempts the boys to kiss their little cousins under it. Okay, that took an odd turn. A proceeding which affords both the boys and the old gentleman unlimited satisfaction. Okay. But which rather outrages Grandma's ideas of decorum, until Grandpa says that when he was just 13 years and 3 months old, he kissed Grandma under a mistletoe too, on which the children clap their hands and laugh very heartily, as do Aunt George and Uncle George, and Grandma looks pleased, and says with a benevolent smile that Grandpa always was an impudent dog, on which the children laugh very heartily again, and Grandpa more heartily than any of them. Cool Skeleton raises his eyebrow. You what? Yes, indeed. But all these diversions are nothing to the subsequent excitement, when Grandmama in a high cap and slate-colored silk gown, and Grandpapa with a beautiful plaited shirt, frill, and white neckerchief, seat themselves on one side of the drawing-room fire, with Uncle George's children and little cousins innumerable seated in the front, waiting the arrival of the anxiously expected visitors. Dr. Zayton waits so Grandpa and Grandma and Grandpa are cousins? I don't know. No, I don't think so, but I think they're just not writing it very clearly here. Suddenly, a hackney coach is heard to stop, and Uncle George, who has been looking out of the window, exclaims, "Here's Jane!" On which the children rush to the door and scamper helter-skelter downstairs,
and Uncle Robert and Aunt Jane and the dear little baby and the nurse and the whole party are ushered upstairs amidst tumultuous shouts of "Oh my!" from the children, and frequent repeated warnings not to hurt baby from the nurse, and Grandpapa takes the child, and Grandmama kisses her daughter, and the confusion of this first entry has scarcely subsided, when some other aunts and uncles with more cousins arrive, and the grown-up cousins flirt with each other. Okay. And so do the little cousins too, for that matter. Double okay? And nothing is to be heard but a confused din of talking, laughing, and merriment. Dr. Zeta, LOL, yes, I don't know what to make of this. A hesitating double knock at the street door, heard during a momentary pause in the conversation, excites a general inquiry of "Who's there?" and two or three children who have been standing at the window announce in a low voice that it's "poor Aunt Margaret." Upon which Aunt George leaves the room to welcome the newcomer, and Grandmama draws herself up rather stiff and stately, for Margaret married a poor man without her consent, and poverty not being a sufficiently weighty punishment for her offence, has been discarded by her friends, and debarred the society of her dearest relatives. But Christmas has come round, and the unkind feelings that have struggled against better dispositions during the year have melted away before its genial influence, like half-formed ice beneath the morning sun. It is not difficult in a moment of angry feeling for a parent to denounce a disobedient child, but to banish her at a period of general goodwill and hilarity from the hearth round which she has sat on so many anniversaries of the same day, expanding by slow degrees from infancy to girlhood, and then bursting almost imperceptibly into the high-spirited and beautiful woman, is widely different. The air of conscious rectitude and cold forgiveness which the old lady has assumed sits ill upon her, and when the poor girl is led in by her sister, pale in looks and broken in spirit, not from poverty, for that she could bear, but from the consciousness of undeserved neglect and unmerited unkindness, it is easy to see how much of it is assumed. A momentary pause succeeds, and the girl breaks suddenly from her sister and throws herself sobbing on her mother's neck. The father steps hastily forward and grasps her husband's hand. Friends crowd round to offer their hearty congratulations, and happiness and harmony again prevails. As to the dinner, it's perfectly delightful. Nothing goes wrong, and everybody is in the very best of spirits, and disposed to please and be pleased. Grandpapa relates a circumstantial account of the purchase of the turkey, with a slight digression relative to the purchase of previous turkeys on former Christmas days, which Grandmama corroborates to the minutest particular. Uncle George tells stories and carves poultry, and drinks wine, and jokes with the children at the side table, and winks at the cousins that are making love. Oh dear. I know the language is different back then, but oh dear, that did not sound good. Or being made love to, double O dear, and, and exhilarates everybody with his good humor and hospitality. And when at last the stout servant staggers in with the gigantic pudding with a sprig of holly in the top, Dr. Zadium, it is that kind of party. I hope not. There is such a laughing and shouting and clapping of little chubby hands, and kicking up of fat dumpy legs, as can only be equalled by the applause with which the astonishing feat of pouring lighted brandy into minced pies is received by the younger visitors. Then the dessert, and the wine, and the fun! Such beautiful speeches, and such songs, from Aunt Margaret's husband, who turns out to be such a nice man, and so attentive to Grandmama. Even Grandpapa not only sings his annual song with unprecedented vigor, but on being honored with an unanimous encore, according to annual custom, actually comes out with a new one, which nobody but Grandmama ever heard before, and a young scapegrace of a cousin who had been in some disgrace with the old people for certain heinous sins of omission and commission, neglecting to call, and persisting in drinking Burton ale, astonishes everybody into convulsions of laughter by volunteering the most extraordinary comic songs that were ever heard. And thus the evening passes in a strain of rational goodwill and cheerfulness, doing more to awaken the sympathies of every member of the party in behalf of his neighbor, and to perpetuate their good feeling during the ensuing year, than all the homilies that have ever been written by all the divines that have ever lived. There are 100 associations connected with Christmas, which we should very much like to recall to the minds of our readers. There are 100 comicalities inseparable from the period, on which it would give us equal pleasure to dilate. We have attained our ordinary limits, however, and cannot better conclude than by wishing each and all of them, individually and collectively, a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Well, I'm not sure what to make of that party. I thought it started off as a really nice, wonderful, sweet accounting of a family Christmas party. Kind of turned into something else, didn't it? I'm not sure now if I'd want to go and visit um, Dickens' Christmas parties if they're that kind of party. Private Mac must have been some party. Dr. Zadium, well, they sure kept it in the family. Oh, well, yes. Well, let's go to our little chat area and we will do a little talk about tonight's chapter of A Christmas Carol. Ah, so the final chapter. Scrooge's redemption is complete. It's a very short chapter. I mean, um, compared to all the other ones, it kind of is rushed. It more or less checks off all the little things that Scrooge has to do. Go to see his nephew, go to see Cratchit, um, basically redeem himself with everyone that he has wronged so far. Um, Adaptations of this ending, Kinshon, makes me wonder if Dickens was on a deadline. That I don't know. Because it wasn't written, it was written as a book. It wasn't, well, a novelette. It wasn't written in a magazine. Um, so it might have been he was running out of steam at that point. So he just wanted to finish the story. I mean, again, it was also written to pay off a debt. It wasn't. It was a small little tale. It wasn't written to be anything other than a way to pay off his debts. Although he put quite a bit of his talent into it. So that I can't answer, unfortunately. Um, Adaptations of this final little segment, they more or less follow it, although there are little differences, little changes. Especially when it comes to the meeting with Cratchit. Most versions follow the book where he waits for Cratchit at the office, and Cratchit comes in and he scares the living daylights out of Cratchit for a good laugh. Um, there are versions though. Um, I know of which ones. The 1938 version does this. Mickey's Christmas Carol does this. Um, 1970s Scrooge the Musical does a big version of this. But there are versions where Scrooge, instead of waiting for Cratchit to come to the office, he goes to Cratchit. 1938's version, in fact, he doesn't do any of the, hiding behind a fake crabbiness. He just comes out and he's pleasant and nice to Cratchit. 1970's version ends on a huge musical number, which is a re-singing of all the various different songs. Thank you very much, Father Christmas, all that huge musical number as he basically spends all his money giving toys away to all the children and then proclaims that all his debts are fulfilled and he's canceling all the debts, which always bothered me a little bit because what is he going to do with his business then? Hopefully it's only for Christmas and he does something because that's a little bit odd. Um, and Mickey's Christmas Carol, they keep in Scrooge's faking his anger in Kinshon. I can't remember which is when he went to Cratchit's with a bundle of laundry. That is Mickey's Christmas Carol. That is Mickey's Christmas Carol you're thinking of. Because in the earlier scene, one of Cratchit's job was to deal with his laundry. And so he did that in this version, in Mickey's Christmas Carol, towards the end. Except it's filled with toys. Which is cute. Um, I'm not sure. There's another version I know of, which I can't remember, where where Scrooge actually meets up with his lost love again from earlier, which I'm kind of torn on. One, it's a nice little closure for him, but two, it's kind of past the point where he can redeem on that. I think. Um, but it's usually most of the time they do keep it exactly as the chapter keeps it, with just filling out a little bit because again it is a very very short sudden chapter. Um, there was a rumor, I think, I heard somewhere, it was just a rumor, that the reason they emphasize the fact that Tiny Tim did not die was because in an earlier draft that he had sent in for the editors, he actually didn't mention if Tiny Tim survived or not. And he would sent it back, and so Dickens rewrote it to emphasize very heartily that Tiny Tim survives. It was a there have been again various versions with that. They they usually just stop at Scrooge proclaiming that he will help Tiny Tim. There have been some film versions where we actually see Tiny Tim show up again, not crippled. Um, the 19, I think it's 51 version with Alistair Sims ends on that note, which is kind of cute. It's kind of a cute scene. Um, and then of course there's the infamous turkey scene, which some people have complained about the turkey because of the fact that technically that means Mrs. Cratchit has to cook the thing. This huge turkey, which has been described as being bigger than Tiny Tim. Julian 20, blank turkey. Yes, blank turkey. Um, it is a nice coda to the story. It does what it needs to do and basically finishes off everything that Scrooge that the story needed to tell. Cool Skeleton Turkey isn't that good. Change my mind. I am not a fan of turkey, honestly, myself. I agree with you with that. There's an interesting little thing with that. In the As you'll notice in the book, they talk about Cratchit having goose for Christmas, and then that Scrooge is sending them a turkey. Now the reason for that is because back then turkey was something that could only be afforded by the rich, or at least the higher middle class. If you were poor, there is no way you could have gotten a turkey for Christmas. You would more have likely had a goose or sometimes maybe a duck, but more likely a goose for Christmas. Turkey was a very, very expensive dish for um, for a Christmas dinner. And there were some people, in fact, back then who would actually reserve turkeys ahead of time. That's how expensive they got, and how difficult it could be to get some back then during the Victorian age. You would become part of like a turkey club, and you would pay ahead of time so that when it was time for Christmas, you could get your turkey. There's a Sherlock Holmes story that was written around that time, which more or less demonstrates that fact. Kintron, I think turkeys were essentially imported. I don't recall them being native to England. That's interesting because they were basically imported. There were attempts to raise turkeys in England, but it didn't really work out because England doesn't have quite the weather that is necessary for raising or breeding turkeys. So, yeah, they were more or less often imported, which added to how expensive they were. Um, so yes, Christmas Carol was Dickens' most famous Christmas writing, but he wrote a lot of Christmas stories. Um, he wrote a Christmas chapter in the Pickwick Papers, which actually preceded Christmas Carol, and it was a chapter in there where a character goes to a Christmas party. Some people talk about this as being kind of a proto Christmas Carol, proto Fezziwigs scene because it's a wealthy Christmas party. Um, he wrote a couple of different Christmas ghost stories. There were some other ones such as The Haunted Man and the Ghost Bargain. Um, the story of the goblins who stole a sexton. There was The Signal Man, which is very famous, a very famous Christmas ghost story that Dickens wrote, and is probably his second most well-known Christmas ghost story. Although it doesn't really have anything to do with Christmas, not even takes place during Christmas, but it was written during the Christmas period. A cool skeleton. Why do people stuff turkeys with breadcrumbs? Soggy bread doesn't even taste good. I could not tell you. I when the times when me and Horace have eaten stuffing, we always eat it outside the turkey. We never cook it in the turkey. Kintron, okay, had to double check, but turkeys are native to the Americas, part of which why Ben Franklin wanted them as a national bird. Yes, they are only originally found in the Americas. Again, they tried to breed them overseas, but for the most part, that was fairly unsuccessful. I don't know if they breed them nowadays. They might, but unfortunately, I'm not an expert on such matters. Um, what was I saying? But yes, cool skeleton. I would have loved America's state bird to be a turkey. That would be interesting. That would be interesting. But then you couldn't eat them, unfortunately. You wouldn't be able to eat a turkey then. Cool skeleton, Signal Man. Yes, the Signal Man. It is a very famous ghost story by Dickens. It's his second most famous ghost story. Which concerns. I will not read it. I may read it sometime. Which concerns a signalman, which is a person who operates the warning signals at a train station, who is haunted by a ghost, which seems to foretell disaster whenever he sees it. And I won't spoil it. It's an excellent story. Very frightening. It was famously adapted in the 1970s for the BBC's series A Ghost Story at Christmas.
And if you've never seen that adaptation, I actually highly recommend it. It's very, very well done. Very well done. Julian 20, one of my favorites. Oh, good, good, good. So, yes, my dear scholars, that is the end of our holiday season. I should probably say what is coming up in future, but the truth is, I am going to take a week's break so that I may, that so Horace and myself may rest, get our energies back, do a few little cleaning up of the study, and then we will come back the week after with more Return to Monkey Island and another reading stream, which I have not planned out yet, but there will be another reading stream in future. Cool Skeleton, may you have a book squid free break. Thank you so much. That would be very nice. So, my dear scholars, I think we shall close out for night, and thus I say unto you, good evening, good morning, good afternoon. Till we meet again in the study, take care, and I shall see you once again. Bye bye and farewell.